In this video, we'll introduce you to our storytelling life cycle and explore the tension between creating the story and analyzing the data. The first section explores the life cycle. We'll then look at ideas, themes, and characters as tools to create your story. We'll then talk about the data analysis and the pros and cons of doing it first. And finally, we'll explore the tension between story creation and data analysis. When we're designing a new story, we follow our storytelling life cycle. Think of this as a process or a framework for working through the different stages to build and publish a data-driven story. One of the more challenging parts of creating a sports story is the friction between data analysis and ideas and characters. Every great sports story lives in the tension between what the data shows and what the human story reveals. However, it's sometimes difficult to know which one comes first. Oftentimes, your key theme or idea will drive through your entire story. There are many ways to create a storyline, but here are 3 high-level ideas which you might want to explore. The first is discomfort, the second is empathy, and the third is conflict. Think of these as the very beginning of your story, that is, the ideas from which you will build your character and story. If you create the idea for your story first, then the data should naturally follow. A great quote from the book entitled Pixar Storytelling is as follows: "Most good stories revolve around watching a character struggle outside of his or her comfort zone." A brilliant theme captured here is the protagonist getting the opposite of what they want the most. In sports stories, we might see this discomfort through the following: being a prospect moving from the minor league to the pros, especially where an athlete might be undersized. An athlete that is going through an injury or illness and faces a path to recovery. An athlete at the top of his or her game but doesn't have the support mechanism of the team around them. The examples are innumerable. Empathy connects. It makes the audience care about the character. It's about revealing human motivations and feelings, so your story resonates emotionally. Finally, conflict is motion. It drives the plot forward. It can be internal, for example, doubt, fear, and ambition, or external, for example, rivalries, injustice, and stakes. You can use it when you want your story to grip the audience and keep them invested. Returning to our storytelling life cycle, you may choose to do a data analysis first. However, you might find yourself spending a lot of time working through the data, for example, digging through tables, graphs, and models. And while you might gain clarity and credibility, you may also lose emotion and connection. Starting with analysis means leading with evidence. You're not guessing the story, you're discovering it. By doing this, you're more objective to the facts and less likely to shape the data to fit a preconceived narrative. That is, you discover the truth and then shape the story around it. Also, you can find surprises, for example, discovering interesting stories in the statistical outliers and anomalies. And lastly, you build more analytical depth to your story. You better understand the nuances before simplifying them for your audience. But what do you lose by doing this? First, you may end up with a story that is more data analysis than character, so the story is dry. Just imagine a reel that plays stat after stat, but there's no human character to which you're tethering the analysis. Second, the data-first story might be devoid of emotion and can feel more like findings instead of a journey. They tell us what happened and not why it matters. Third, with the focus on charts, the people behind the data disappear. You risk losing the "so what" moment in your story. So how do you strike the balance between character and data? This is where the tension lies. We've spent time in this video on how you can build your story around ideas and characters and then bring data into it. However, the reality is that you will likely move back and forth between the idea and character and the data analysis, refining as you go. Be sure to experiment and find what works for you. And this process can be frustrating. For example, we spend a lot of time iterating between story creation and data analysis. And the reality is that some of this is sketching out the story, doing an analysis, checking the story, refining the analysis, and so on. An iterative loop until the idea and analysis tighten around one another. For example, we wanted to create a story about the average time it takes NHL superstars to peak. We started with a hypothesis and then an analysis. But as we got into the story, we realized there was a much more interesting story about the comparison of 2 superstars, Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. Lemieux had an interesting backstory that, when in focus, became a question. What if Mario hadn't missed any games? We didn't necessarily abandon the initial analysis, however, qualitative and more human elements pushed their way to the front of the story. This brought more life to the story and, frankly, made it more fun to create. So if you leverage our storytelling lifecycle, we found starting with the sketch of the storyline helps, but iterating between the idea and analysis helps shape it as you go.